So the topic is very, the interesting and very, very helpful topic for us who are working with international students. So building connections between the Career Center and International Student Services. The presenter is one of our community member, Beth Bernhardt, Assistant Director at New York University's Wasserman Center for Career Development. Beth, you can start.
Thank you so much, Eun Young, and I'm really excited to be here today. This is my first year with NCDA and with this committee. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. Sorry, one moment here. Great. So today's presentation is about building connections between the Career Center and International Student Services Office. So nearly all institutions of higher education have both a Career Center and an International Student Services Office, but the degree to which these two work together really varies. The missions have so much overlap, and so being more connected has some really significant benefits for international student career development. So my objectives for today really begin with just defining the overlapping missions of these two offices, thinking about how we can really identify how to build those partnerships between the two offices and ultimately foster inclusion and belonging for international students. But before really launching into the content, I'd like to launch a couple tools to understand where folks are in terms of your collaboration with your International Student Services Office. And if you could just answer these two full questions: how often do you work with your International Student Services Office? And in the past year, how many collaborative programs have you conducted with your colleagues in that ISS office? Okay, so in sharing the results, it looks like a lot of folks, almost 50%, are working pretty frequently, but we also have some not so much. And then it looks like in terms of collaborative programs, we've got some folks doing it quite frequently, some folks not doing any programs at all. Okay, so to provide a little bit of context as to why this is an important topic, I want to begin with a little bit of a mini lit review. So this is really grounded in research about the international student experience when it comes to transitioning to a US institution. So this begins with research back in 1960 from Oberg about the idea of culture shock. And culture shock is really that idea of a loss of a cultural customs and social roles when transitioning to a new culture. And this connects to the idea of cognitive fatigue discussed by Mori in 2000 that comes to the idea that when someone enters a new culture, there's a lot more that goes into managing that culture, and that can often result in feelings of inferiority and self-doubt as well. As all of us know who work with international students, there are many additional requirements upon arrival to their institution of higher education in comparison to domestic peers. So this includes things like extra orientations, paperwork, the added challenges of working both on campus and off campus. And in navigating all of these pieces, it's a lot of office hopping, going from one place to the next. And this can be very frustrating and really cause a bit of a lack of trust and confidence in the institution. We know that a big part of our mission is supporting international student career development, and the Office of International Student Services, that's a big part of what they do as well. A significant focus for us is supporting individuals to secure employment, secure internships, jobs. And when it comes to the advisors in the International Student Services Office, a big part of their work is really educating students about work authorization options and helping process, navigate all of that. There's also a big overlap in advising topics and common themes within programming. International Student Services offices tend to do a lot of workshops on OPT and CPT. As career development professionals, we tend to do programs about job searching, and there's a lot of overlap within these. Students are seeing this overlap, but many times the two offices are doing their programs, doing their advising within silos. So in the next several slides, I am going to discuss strategies for us to really make sure that we are not doing this in silos, that we are doing these programs collaboratively, that we are co-facilitating with our colleagues from the International Student Services offices. So this really begins with cross-training. So while we are each experts in our own areas, there are need-to-knows for staff across both offices. As career development professionals, we are not immigration experts, but it's very important that we do know the basics of OPT and CPT. What is involved in applying? How does the academic department play a role? How does the International Student Services Office play a role? It's also important that we're able to educate students about how to speak to employers about their work authorization options. And I know last week, Anne gave a great presentation on communicating about those options, but it's important that we, and when I say we, not only a few select coaches dedicated to international students, but really coaches across the offices are able to really speak to this. We also want to be prepared to bring up visa status in the job search. When should you bring this up? How should you bring this up? How should you be addressing questions on application forms? It's really important that we have that understanding, and much of that will come from some cross-training with our colleagues at the International Student Services Office. On the flip side, it's really important that our colleagues in the ISS office are aware of general career offerings, understand things like resume tailoring, for example. They're able to refer students not only to go schedule an appointment with us on our career management system like Handshake or Simplicity, but that they're really able to refer to specific virtual resources and programs themselves. So this cross-training happens by making sure that we are educated, and to ensure that this is a priority from the beginning of employment, it's an important piece of employee onboarding for staff in both offices. So my recommendation, one also grounded in some research, is to really ensure that within the onboarding process, new employees are meeting with at least one staff member of the other office. They're provided with some key information about all of these topics. Another really valuable piece in building this connection is to provide some facilitated networking opportunities. So we can be educated about work authorization as much as possible, but if we don't have relationships with our colleagues in the International Student Services Office, there's limitations to really how students feel they are being supported. So in the 2020 January, very soon before the pandemic hit, at New York University, where I'm an assistant director at the Wasserman Center for Career Development, we planned a networking opportunity with the Office of Global Services and the Career Center, which is a very large school. So this was about 65 employees coming together to, one, network, get to know one another. We started the event with a staff bingo activity where we had a sheet that provided different team names, and staff were asked to go and find someone within each of those boxes. So for example, an employer engagement team member, an undergraduate student team member, a graduate student team member, an advisor for students at Office of Global Services, someone at the Office of Global Services who manages communications. And that allowed for some more informal, putting some faces to names. After that, we split into small groups to explore some common advising scenarios that very much overlap within the two offices. So we broke into groups comprised of members of each of the two offices and worked through scenarios to provide feedback, what should be shared from both of those two perspectives. Then we went to the larger group and shared out some of what we had come up with. And this led to some commitments to action from leadership in both offices. One of the immediate actions that occurred was the development of a working group between the Career Center and the Office of Global Services, meeting monthly, collaborating on programs, collaborating on resources. For example, most recently, we developed a document about talking to employers about work authorization with some sample language, with some external resources to help with those conversations and inform decision-making there. This group is also a place for concerns, for questions to be shared. For example, recently, a question came up at the Career Center's coaching roundtable about CPT for students who had not yet been in the United States. They spent their first year of their academic program in their home country, so could they do CPT upon arriving or not? That was taken to this group, and the information was then passed on by liaisons within the group. The other piece of having these collaborative groups and these relationships is the increase in personalized referrals. So when it comes to fostering inclusion and belonging, research shows that a big piece of this is showing that what you are focused on matters to those you're working with. So if a student comes to you and asks a question that is too technical for you to answer as a career development professional, rather than sending them to that ISS office, being able to pick up the phone and call a colleague in that office, or simply being able to send an email connecting, that really goes a long way in helping the student feel supported, helping the student feel like they have that confidence in their institution. And continuing with these collaborative strategies, we come to events. So in the poll earlier, I saw that some individuals have done collaborative events, others have not. This is a great way to really show international students there's a united front between the two offices when you're planning events together, you're facilitating them together. Just seeing on the university calendar, let's say an incoming international student, to be able to see that there are events co-facilitated, co-sponsored by these two offices, that really does a lot to show that I'm included in the offerings that my university has. My needs are a priority. So examples of these events I've listed here. I'm sure many of you have done similar events, job searching for international students, where the Career Center professional about the process and the International Student Services colleague talks more about the work authorization pieces, considerations to keep in mind when it comes to timeline there, navigating US work culture, another option, international identities in the workplace. These are programs that I have done at NYU in collaboration with some of my colleagues in our Office of Global Services, which is the ISS office name there. I've also put on here International Student Career Conference, and this is something that I did at a former institution, and I know many schools do it as well, but this is ideally an event co-planned by members of both offices that not only involves voices from the two offices, but involves immigration attorney, speaker, involves employers from companies who hire international students, involves voices from alumni who perhaps have had that experience working with the Career Center, working with the ISS office, and are now working in the United States to share their perspective. And when we think about events in general, it's really important anytime there is a guest speaker to ensure that international voices are included on those panels, in those speakers. So when there's more of a relationship and connection between the Career Center and the International Student Services Office, can leverage that to identify folks to participate across events. And I know I mentioned earlier about how the ISS office is often doing events that are really educating about what is CPT, what is OPT, what's STEM OPT, what's H-1B, and having a Career Center staff member there just to present even 2 slides, that really, again, shows that united commitment, that shows that the overlap in mission is understood by staff, and that commitment to that holistic career development is really there. I've also listed a strategy on this slide about co-investment in online platforms. So I'm sure many folks here use platforms such as Going Global or Interstride, and those are great platforms for international students, great to promote both from the Career Center perspective and from the International Student Services perspective. But these platforms are often very costly, and sometimes it is too much for a Career Center to take on within their own budget. Given that these platforms are really serving the missions of both offices, co-investment in the platform is a great thing to explore as a way to ensure that these resources can be available to the international student population. Another piece here to consider is physical space. Research has shown that having the Career Center and the International Student Services Office located in the same building, or at least within close proximity, also really helps to demonstrate that united front, that overlap, that commitment to the holistic career development of international students. It really helps to show that the offices understand that. And by having this close proximity, it can really lessen barriers to engagement. So more likely to, after going to the Career Center, follow up with the ISS office right then if that close proximity is there. With that being said, physical space is not a substitute for things like personalized referral, but it is something for institutions, specifically leadership, to consider if international students are a priority, and very much should be, given the Open Doors report of this past year communicated that still over 1 million international students at US institutions, especially as we hopefully see return to more in person, that will be very important. The last piece here is that this sort of visibility does really help to build trust in the institution. And that's really important for international students who have taken a leap to come to the US, invest in education and opportunities there. Their career development is definitely an important piece of often why that choice is made to come to the United States. So really critical to be able to have that support in place, not just from one area within the university, but one that's very much united between the two offices really that are focused on international student employment. So key takeaways here. The first piece is the value of cross-training and cultivating staff relationships among folks in both offices. Second is building collaborative programs and initiatives. So once we have those relationships in place, once we have that training, it's time to really think about how can we be programming together as much as possible when it comes to this population. How can we be ensuring that students are getting as much information as they can in one place rather than having to continue to office hop? As I said at the beginning with the brief literature review, it's really exhausting for anybody to be going from office to office, and especially for somebody who is managing a new culture that has so much mental exhaustion, so much of that cognitive fatigue that Mori explained in some of their research back from 2000. And ultimately, the goal here is that by doing this, belonging and inclusion of international individuals will be fostered, which is such an important piece of having that meaningful educational experience, and also ensuring that goals are supported, that goals can be reached. Here are some of my references, or all of my references, I should say. I'm happy to address any questions. I'd love to also hear if folks who are doing collaborative programs, if they wouldn't mind sharing perhaps some of what they are doing at their institutions as well.